I want to start out by introducing some of my staff here. I recruited them at the last minute. Austin Barker, he's our locomotive foreman, and Ted Schulte, he's my fireman.
Would the
The
Adams
rest of our
County
staff,
deputy please come to the front? The Adams County deputy.
the rest of our staff wanted to be here, but they have families and other things on the weekends. Weekends on our crew are something really special. We love our jobs and we love what we
Would
do.
Lisa and Paul, please come to the front information booth. Thank you.
It's a real privilege to be a part of a program like this, but we do have our work cut out for us. And so with that, I'm going to get going. We've got a lot to talk about. You can see a little display up here. When we're done, everyone's welcome to come up and have a look. Just be really careful
Lisa and
walking
Paul.
through the aisles and the chairs and
Please
everything.
come to the front information booth.
Maybe I should get their microphones. Okay, well this program is dedicated to the men and women of the Union Pacific Railroad. And for those of us who have the very special opportunity to be involved in a program like this, this is our crew. This is the crew. The moment that we arrived back in California with the locomotive. What I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of bounce around a little bit. It's such a special experience that we had getting the locomotive ready to go and all the trials and tribulations, all the planning, all the hard work with such a small group of people. I'm going to kind of retrace some of those things. So for those of you that have seen the presentation last year, some of those slides are going to look familiar. So just bear with us and I'll kind of give you a little update from where we started and where we are now. So now we're going to back up a little bit. This is also dedicated to my near dear friend Ed. For those who knew Ed Gerlitz, great man. Well, there we are. The 4014 sitting out at the Los Angeles County Fair. Locomotive was donated in 1962. And the organization, the Railway and Locomotive Historical Society, sent a letter to the railroad asking for one of the big boys. Luckily, the Union Pacific had the forethought to save that class of locomotives, very thankfully. They very generously took the locomotive out of the what would have been the scrapping line for that locomotive. They ran it through the facility, they put all the accoutrements back on it, and they kindly sent that out to California. It took quite a while for it to make its way out to California, and there it resided for many, many years. 1989, they needed to move the locomotive, and they did move it a short distance across the parking lot, and that's where it had resided until we came looking for it. Fun process of getting the locomotive ready to go. We mapped out a strategy, and a lot of it begins with the 3985, that very special locomotive that we have. I laid out a course to restore that locomotive or to continue the work that was needed on that locomotive. So when this opportunity came about, I think they were somewhat shocked when they asked for information on what it would take and what steps would be required to get that the big boy going, as I essentially changed the number 3985 to UP 4014, and they had that information right there. So that's kind of how the process started. So we took a lot of our tools and our equipment out there, and we laid out a plan, and that plan came together rather quickly. And as soon as we actually took possession of the locomotive, we were out there working on it. And that required a lot of work. Parking lot, big vast area out there. The railroad was very gracious, very helpful with us. Helpful with us. They gave us all the equipment we needed. We borrowed that big front end loader from the West Colton Maintenance Way, and we told them we need it for a few weeks. We kept it for I don't know how many months. But, they were always so gracious and always so helpful, and that's the biggest part of the story that we have to tell is how helpful everyone is and how supportive everyone is with what we do. So now we're working, and we had to build ourselves some track. Very ambitious. How are you going to move a 450-ton locomotive a mile to a commuter railroad and get it home again? And we put the plan together. This is how we're going to do it, and this is what we're going to need. So truck after truck showed up with track panels. and we rented other equipment that we needed. And it was a project that we wanted to do from the beginning. You can involve all kinds of different entities to help with a big project like this, but in the end, who moves big equipment? And who best to move it than the railroad and those that are responsible for it and will care for it and do all the work necessary to move it home safely. The track is in place and we're ready to start positioning the museum equipment outside. That had to be done first. And not only had the big boy not moved for some time, but this museum equipment had been stationary for a long time as well. So we had to disassemble a Climax locomotive and take the rods off of the little 060 and service them and make sure we didn't damage them in any way as we slid them back into some temporary track that we built. So that took a few days of our time, but all part of the plan. And there we are getting ready to move the outer dock, Outer Harbor Dock and Warehouse Company. The museum does some great restoration work. You can see the nice cab that they recently put on the locomotive. And for a museum that has limited staffing and the abilities to work within such a confined area, for us to come in and start just moving things around, they were just amazed. We would say, well, we're going to move this, this, and this today. And in their line of thinking, you know, they're so accustomed to doing things on a volunteer basis. So next thing you know, by the time the afternoon came around, those two locomotives were out of the way, and we'd swung the track over, and now we're going to take the big boy out. So it was quite a fun time for all of us. A lot of hard work, but it was quite enjoyable. You guys are snickering. Along the lines of doing the work ourselves, we had to drill holes in the panel track. Any number of things that you have to do to build a railroad. Again, it was our plan to do as much of that work as we can. Like all projects, we have to work within the budget constraints that are given to us. So that was very carefully planned that we were going to execute as much of that work as we physically could. So here we are, we've got our staff out there getting familiar with a gas-powered rail drill. And I have to say, we used the same drill bit for 178 holes. And this particular type of drill bit is designed to be disposable. You use it for a couple of holes. Well, because of the nature of that drill, we had a little bit of logistics getting more drill bits. So we were sourcing those drill bits, and in the meantime, we had to keep progress going. So I told the guys, be really careful. And they did, and they resharpened that drill, and they used it for 178 holes. It's got to be a record. But that's the care and the determination that our staff has. And again, that's a reflection of our company and what we do. We're determined to do it, and it's not going to be an easy task. There's going to be times when it's going to be difficult for us, but we're very determined to make it work, and that's an example of that determination. Now we've got the locomotives out, and here comes the big day where we're going to move the locomotive out. And we have to build that track. A little bit of a learning curve when you're building a railroad, especially using second-hand track components. And the parking lot, unfortunately, was not smooth. There was a lot of variances, sewer holes, sewer lines, a lot of things that we had to deviate around. So once we got into our rhythm, we really were able to make some good progress. But those first couple of days, I think the crew was questioning the wisdom of the decision to do this track work ourselves, because we've got the equipment we need, but we really don't have the heavy equipment that you normally would use to build a railroad. One of the many job briefings, another thing that we have to do, and this is again part of the methodology, the thought process of a large railroad company, the largest railroad company, and that is safety. Everything that we do, all the processes and every task that we undertake, the primary aspect, the number one thought is that of safety. And it can't be a motto, it can't be a slogan, it can't be something that you hang on the side of a building and it becomes a slogan. It's not that. We're dealing with equipment that's extremely deadly. Railroading is inherently very, very dangerous. And when you're working with equipment, heavy equipment, locomotives that haven't moved in a long time, specialty equipment, track construction, all those things, it requires a tremendous amount of coordination and close supervision and adherence to the rules. I know that sounds like something you'd expect a boss to say, but it's something that we're all very committed to. One injury in any corporation, in any business, it's catastrophic for those that are injured, but it's debilitating for a crew, and it's something that just cannot be tolerated. Now we're back in the museum. We've got some parts removed from the locomotive. In this case, we've got the big long piston rods and pistons and the valves and things that we're going to add to the tender, things that we can't have on the locomotive when we operate it. Steam locomotive, when it's operating, requires special lubrication valve oil forced under pressure, under hydraulic pressure, into various parts of the engine to lubricate it. Well, this locomotive will not be operating home, so we've got to take special care and remove all those components and put them in the tender. The tender is very light. The centipede tender on the 3 classes of locomotives is one of the things that you have to be mindful of, particularly backing the locomotive across the parking lot. Locomotive hadn't moved for longer than I've been alive, so we wanted to take no chances. So we added some water, and we took all those surplus components and put them in the tender.